Welcome to another installment of our Life Abundantly podcast, where I am super excited to have a special guest with me today. And we're going to be diving deep into and continuing our mini series for the podcast talking about faith. We know that on Sundays, Pastor has been diving into faith and just really kind of ripping that all apart, getting deep and kind of understanding what that is so believers can really know what it means to walk into faith and to have faith. And so on these Wednesdays, we're also diving a little bit deeper too in some specific topics. And so as you know, May is always a big month because it is also happens to be Mother's Day. Even though Mother's Day passed a couple of weeks ago, I thought it would be great to do an episode where we really talk about motherhood and the faith that it takes for motherhood in a different facet that you may not think about. So I am joined by none other than, we call each other Rumi because, okay, so we were friends through my cousin, your friend, middle school. Yes. No, was that middle school? Yep, that was middle school. And we were introduced. Then we weren't really friends in high school. We didn't go to the same high school.
It wasn't my fault. She says I didn't see her, but I didn't have my glasses on. Let's keep going.
And then we were roommates in college. Yep. And then now we actually happen to be related. Yes. So now we're cousins. So we call each other Rumi Cuz. But I am joined here by a very, very special and dear friend of mine, Miss Christian Guy, who I happen to adore. We've been through ups, downs, yes, in-betweens, all the things. I'm truly grateful for you.
Don't get me to cry before we even start.
I know. Okay, so we won't do all of that. We'll keep it short and sweet. But I love her. This is going to be good. And so we're diving deep into faith, especially when it comes into motherhood. Mm-hmm. We've had somewhat similar journeys when it comes to fertility and different things like that. And so what I really wanted to dive deep on tonight is faith that moves. And so not faith that moves God, because we know God has already ordained and willed our lives for us. Yeah. However, he's looking for us to stand up and to do exactly what we've been called to do and to trust and believe and have faith in him and have faith in his word. And so what I'm excited about is that we get to talk and we get to help you all learn, and we learn as well as I know we're going to learn some things as we're talking about this, but faith that really moves and faith that really shows God, I really trust, I really believe you, and especially when it comes to motherhood, because I think, the world sometimes has, and sometimes in the church, we have a rosy picture of motherhood. Mm-hmm. You get married, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes, it doesn't always happen that way. No. Some people do have challenges with growing their families. And so I have been, very transparent about some of my challenges. And so, but it doesn't just stop at getting pregnant and having a successful pregnancy and then also having a healthy child. It also still goes beyond that, because I want to say how many of you know, none of y'all can see me, but
it's just the call and response in you.
Exactly. But, I know that you all can agree with me that it continues to take faith as you parent. Yes. I saw something really interesting. I don't know if I shared it with you or in our group chat, but I saw something super interesting where it was just like, normalize keeping my kid away from children who haven't been parented well. And so it takes faith to parent well. And so
that's a sermon.
That's what I want to kind of talk through and kind of understand through your journey, kind of things that you are doing. And so question number one, and then we're also going to dive into some scripture. So also have your Bibles out. But question number one, so faith is more than a belief, it's a movement. So for you, and I'll let you kind of tell a little bit about your journey, your children, and what you're doing. Mm-hmm. When we think about faith as a movement, for you, what does that mean? And what does that look like for you? And how has it looked for you?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
So let me give a little bit of backstory. So for those who don't know me, I'm Reese's friend. But my husband and I, Jeremiah, we've been married. It'll be 10 years in September.
That's crazy.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
I said that to him the other day, like, you are still here.
by the grace and the mercy of the Lord. Yes. Hand clap goes right there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really loud.
He likes me. But so like, I think it was like at the beginning of 2020, I finally got to the point where I convinced him to like, let's have kids. Let's have more kids. Cause at that point we had already had our son, Kendry. And so we decided to start trying, and I got pregnant like immediately. Like, I think it was March 2020 when we found out that I was pregnant. And no less than like a week, within that same week, I found out that I was miscarrying. And so it's interesting because, you know, it was like we were so excited and we were like ready to tell everybody. And then like that, it just like we had to let it go. We had to let go of the thought of what that that journey was going to look like. And so then there was more times where we got pregnant and we lost the baby. And finally, I decided that I was tired of going to OBGYNs that told me, oh, this is normal. You know,
It's
a lot of women have miscarriages. And so you shouldn't be too consumed with it. After the second time, I was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
And decided to go to a fertility doctor, and they were about to start doing some tests. And we got pregnant again. So then it was like, okay, we're pregnant. We may not really need you. We're going to keep going on this journey. But they wanted to monitor me. And for this pregnancy, I was much further along than with the other two. It seemed like it was a viable one. And lo and behold, I was actually on FaceTime with Jeremiah because he couldn't come to the office. And they were looking at the ultrasound, and she couldn't find a heartbeat. And so in that moment, it was like, okay, how does this keep happening? How do we keep getting this excitement about, you know, promise, and then it's immediately taken from us? And so I think in all of that, the journey for me and just what faith looked like for me in that moment was just to keep going. It was just to like not let the answers that they were giving us, the doctors were giving us, not letting that be enough. And really continuing to press forward and say, okay, we're going to find better answers because you guys suck. But we're also going to, we're not going to fill our heads with all the things that Google says about this journey, and, you know, how we can easily get discouraged and go down a rabbit hole with all of the different diagnoses that come up when you, oh yeah, I have this symptom, I have that symptom. And so a big part of our faith journey was not accepting no, but not being consumed by it either.
That's good.
We really had to make sure that as we were doing this journey, that we still loved each other, that we were still spending time with the kid that we did have, making sure that he felt seen and loved. It was crazy because around that same time, Jeremiah lost his job. So it was like all these things back to back to back that kept happening in the middle of a pandemic. And it was interesting. Now I can say this now because we're not in it, but I was like, wow, that would not have been a good time to try to bring life into this world. It would have been really difficult for us to manage down in income, all of the things that come with, you know, bringing new life forth in the middle of a pandemic. So I think even through all of that, our faith was just trusting in God's sovereignty, and that, you know, all of this was going to work out for us. And so.
Yeah. And similar to our journey is we had to go a little bit further than what you all had to do. But it was also through your guidance of, hey, this is where we went, this is what we did, that we were able to start along with some others. And so I think, you know, through that, you know, you're able to see, okay, God, someone else has walked this path, and someone else that I know that loves you, that trusts in you, you know, because the Bible tells us, follow those who through faith and patience inherit the promise. And so it's just like, okay, so I'm going to follow those who did what they were supposed to do while in this situation, but also realizing that I can't hinge my relationship with you on this thing. And I think that's also hard when you're in it.
Yeah.
When you're in something tough, sometimes you want to hinge your entire relationship with God and kind of do a bartering. Well, God, I'll pray more if you give me. And I will do this more if you give me the desire of my heart. And it's not, and your relationship with God is your relationship with God. And so shouldn't be, contingent and transactional.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was one of the toughest periods. I feel like the first miscarriage, you're like, oh, okay, because they try to make it very normal.
Oh, yeah.
And then the second one, I think that one kind of toppled me over. And when I was like, okay, I quit, I'm out. And so through that, I've had to learn through my relationship with God and what it really looked like to trust him, because I do feel like a lot of things kind of have come a little bit easier for me, or so I think. That one was just...
my body was meant to do this and it's not doing it.
Yes, why is it not doing it?
Me?
Exactly. And so there was a lot of things that I thought about, but one thing it helped me to do was dive deeper and to understand the promises and to understand what God was saying and to understand what faith looked like. Yes, it might mean doing some crazy things. Like I know I've bought a lot of books, I've done a lot of things, but through all of that, I've also learned so much about how we were created as the wombed man and how intricately he thought about everything. And for me, it also, that knowledge also helped me to think about, okay, what is my body not doing that it's supposed to do? And how do I also work in concert with my belief and my faith in God to say, okay, well, if I know egg quality is poor and all of these things, here's some natural remedies. Eat better. Stop digesting all the sugar. There were some natural things in plastic. Like there were a ton of things that I was able to do based on research that said, okay, God, I'm taking my natural and pairing it with your super, and we're going to make it supernatural, and things are going to happen. And so for me, it wasn't just sitting back. Like faith that requires movement means, no, I'm going to do my part too. And I'm going to also figure out, because I know you made me, let me understand what exactly you made and how exactly you made me, so we can kind of figure out what exactly is going wrong. And I feel like sometimes as believers, we can avoid going to doctors because we're like,
deflection.
God, I'm healed. Yes, and figuring out and pinpointing, and that has been my biggest thing going through this journey, is figuring out and pinpointing what exactly wasn't going right was such a help for me, because then I was able to say, oh, it's this right here.
I think if that reminds me of something that I heard on a podcast recently where I think it's called affect labeling, where it's like you have the opportunity to like name the thing, whatever the emotion is, because it gives you a little bit more control over your emotion, because now you know what you're feeling, right?
Yeah. And
that kind of translates for me when it came to like the fertility journey. It was like, okay, so to kind of dive in a little bit more, then we went back to the fertility doctor that we started with, and we did some tests. They found out that I had PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And it just basically is like a lot of junk going on with your ovaries. They did a surgery. I got connected to a nutritionist, all the things. But one of the things that you said that, I kind of did the opposite was at some point I stopped researching.
Yeah.
I had to I think for me, it was like, okay, if I go down this rabbit hole, it will affect the way that I show up in my faith journey. Because instead of me hearing the voice of the Lord, I'm going to be hearing the voice of the doctors and the voice of Google. And that, my algorithm is now algorithming and showing me all the things about fertility.
Heavy on the algorithm, because I had to...
You just click on one thing.
And during that time period, I stepped away from social media because it was too much. Everybody in their was pregnant. Like and I happy. Saw babies and I was like, ooh, this is too much. But what I love what you just said was you knew you. And I know I was being led by the Holy Spirit to do that because I needed to know like what specifically is it. And I think that's the good difference is, okay, knowing and hearing the voice of God. For you, because what I may have done may not have worked for you. And God be like, I didn't tell you to do that. I told her to do that. I'm telling you to do something different because you are different. And so what I love about that is when we think about faith, sometimes we also like to replicate and do exactly what some other people have done without thinking and listening to God.
Filtering it through the Holy Spirit.
And we're like, but I've got faith. I'm doing exactly what's right. But are you listening to are you listening to God? Because faith is also trusting his voice and trusting his voice for you, not his voice for someone else, because he told her to do that. He told them to do that. So I wanna go a little bit deeper, and you brought up a really good point. I want to jump to James 2:14, where it says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." And I love this.
What version is that?
Okay, so I'm in the New International Version.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I love about this is we both talked about, okay, these are things we did in the natural because we were like, God, I'm partnering with you on this to see your promise. And so I'm not just going to sit idle by. I'm not just going to sit in my room and cry all day. I'm actually going to do something. I'm actually going to show up, and I'm actually going to help and figure out what's going on. And again, listen to the voice of God, because he may or may not be calling you to do that. But that was super important for me. And what I love about this scripture, it's really talking about, hey, you can say all day, I trust, I believe God, I have faith in God. What action are you doing to back that up? And I know some people who have done some really, I don't want to say outlandish things, that sounds like the wrong word, but have really kind of done some abnormal things to the outside world to really say, okay, well, I'm going to make space. I'm going to make a baby room and prepare. And they were led by God to do all of those things.
I emptied a whole drawer when I was believing for Jeremiah.
I didn't go quite that far.
She said, I didn't have space to empty.
I didn't, but God wasn't leading me to do that. And I heard you say that. I was like, that's good.
And I was in my mama's house, so I really didn't have...
making space for him in somebody else's.
But what I was doing was I was saying I'm being open emotionally to what God had, because clearly in my mama's house I only had a dresser. It wasn't like I had a whole nother room. But that was my act of faith.
That's your act of faith. Yeah. And that's the good part, is whatever God is calling you to do as your act of faith, as your action, do that thing. So I want to segue into another aspect, because after we've both gotten over that hump, but after you get over the hump, you have the child, they're here, they're great, and then you start seeing things differently with your child. And so I admire the way that you are intentional. And I think it was resounded when your pastor talked about a couple weeks ago about your work with autism and helping others through your journey with Kendry, who I affectionately call Peanut. But what I love is that you are so intentional with him, and you do things differently. You speak to him differently, and your results, because I have seen children with autism, your results are very different. Help us and those that are...
I'm like, I'm here.
Right.
I forget we're talking about.
Help us and those that are watching. What are some of the actions you took as a faith step when it came to his diagnosis? And take us through that journey, because I know there's a part of that journey that's a grieving of what was or what you thought would be, and then accepting, okay, God, here's what you've put in front of me. Help me to nurture it well and help me to steward well what you've given me. And not, sit and operate and say, you know what, whatever, do whatever. But you are super intentional. But I know that requires a huge amount of faith and trust in God. What are some of those faith and trust moves that you do regarding his diagnosis?
So, and I'm gonna go back a little bit. So we went through the whole infertility experience, and we were finally pregnant with our now daughter, Carrington Ellis, who's 2. But we were at the point where we were ready to announce that we were pregnant, and it's a good one, and she's here to stay. Had the hashtags ready, had the whole social media posts. Everybody's in matching pajamas. It was delightful. So we were ready. Yes. So we were ready, and that day we actually had a parent-teacher conference for Kendry. And so we put up the post, then we head to the conference.
I didn't know it was that day.
It was that day.
I don't remember that. Okay. I remember. I don't like. I
I
didn't
don't even know
that
if I ever really like said
you
it.
said it was the same day.
Yeah, but it was the same day.
Okay.
And so we go to the conference, and his teacher is like, Kendry's amazing. Like, he was an early reader, just super smart, really into letters and numbers. But she said, in comparison to his peers, he's not doing some of the same things. Like, he's not using some of the same language that his peers are using at this age. He has some difficulty with sitting in the prone position. Not sure like what's going on with him physically, and so she admonished us to get some more tests. And so even in that was a faith walk because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Not to get too political, but they was out here killing people that look like us.
Yeah.
And it was easy to feel like, okay, she's not looking out for us. She wants to label my baby. Mm-hmm. And I had so many family members kind of saying that to me. Like, it was like, yeah, he's smart. He going to be all right. He going to grow out of this. Like, all the things that we say.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, but something is telling me, Holy Spirit is telling me that I should move forward with this. And so that in and of itself was faith, to hear what they were telling us and to move forward with the evaluations. And in doing that, he ended up getting an autism educational designation, which helped speed up the wait list. We were on a wait list for like 18 months for him to get the medical diagnosis, which is what you want. If your child has autism, you want a medical diagnosis because it opens the doors for so many other supports that you don't have to pay for. So we got the educational designation, we got the medical diagnosis, and we're moving forward. And anybody who hears about, who like works in education, you hear about early intervention is best, because you can get in there and you can get your child the supports that they need in order to really like kind of catch up or stay on target. But that required a lot of us because, we were doing well in terms of financially, but there were some things that insurance just didn't pay for. Mm-hmm. And so that in and of itself was also a step of faith, because we just had to do the thing not knowing if we were going to afford it or not. Mm-hmm. So, we ended up, practically speaking, what faith looked like was we got him connected to a speech language pathologist, because that, does so much for him being able to understand language, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, understanding gestures, understanding just, the things, social interactions, the things that people, typical neurotypical people take for granted. We got him an occupational therapist that helped him with something as simple as dressing himself, that activities of daily living, washing his body, combing his hair, cutting with scissors, things that, like, again, neurotypical people take for granted because it's something that you just kind of look at somebody doing and you pick up on it. But the one thing I think in all of this, and I've said this to my husband Jeremiah a couple of times, is all of this whole entire journey feels like a love letter from God for him and I, because there's so many things about my own journey growing up that I was like, man, I was really peculiar. Like, I was a different kid, and I never really understood why until having my own child. And so it just feels like a big hug, because I'm seeing Kendry, and I'm like, I used to do that. I definitely didn't like those textures. Oh, I remember a whole movie from front to back. Like, there's things that like I'm able to self-identify with him on a lot of levels, and I think it just helps me to have like a closeness with him that I wouldn't have had if God didn't allow me to kind of like see myself, a reflection of me in the journey. But I would say like the acts of faith and all of that have been just not taking this sitting down, like really like doing the work. I actually brought a book that I still haven't finished it. You can see where I'm at. I've been reading this book for like 2 years. It is as thin as it is, it's thick. Yeah. And that's also
causing you to like pause.
You have to pause, and I have to digest it. But this book is about a mom. It says a mother's journey in healing her son with autism, and I take the healing part loosely because on one hand, I look at Kendry as there's nothing that needs to change about him in terms of who he is. The reality is we want to help him navigate the world that he's in a little better.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what, I've read in this book is a lot of holistic ways of eating, of things that, like, having air fresheners in his room. We don't do that, like little things like that, just because we're looking at the air quality and we're thinking about how the environment interacts with him and how he interacts with it. So, but even that, like reading a book is something that you're doing in terms of your works with your faith, because it really is so much information out there that we could learn about this diagnosis, and we want to be equipped well. So,
and that's great, because I do see some people who steward well, and I see some people where you can see their children are not stewarded well. And so, and I don't pretend to know what that looks like on either front, but I do know that there is a level of faith that you have to have when it comes to your children and saying, okay, I know what they're saying. I know what I want to see. And then I know the plan and the will of God. And a lot of times what we want doesn't really match up with what God's will is. He's like,
never does.
I don't want that for you.
You got to get it.
I don't want you to go through that, but we choose to do different things. And so I love how you're choosing to be, both of you are choosing to be intentional and to walk it out by faith and to say, okay, well, even though we have this diagnosis, we are going to go the extra mile, because I know the extra mile is not crowded, but we're going to go the extra mile when it comes to him, and we're going to be faithful in what you've given us, versus we're just going to be like, okay, well, why aren't you doing that? And it's just like, okay, wait, you have to do things differently. And so I love that you are super intentional about it. And then you also invite your village in as well. You will send us a note real quick. Hey guys, I know we're all getting together. Here are some things that I need you to do when it comes to Kendry. Like, I think one time you were like, make him give you direct eye contact. Make it like, and those things, I was like, okay. So when I came in, I said, hi, Pete. Like, so it also helps me to say,
to know how to interact
but also I appreciate that, because you're inviting us in a part of his journey, also trusting and believing, okay, we're going to help steward your child steward him well too. But it's also saying, God, I know that the people that you've given me are people for my life. And so I thank you for the people for my life. And I know by faith, I'm going to encounter more people. And so I think that's the whole, I feel like all of our lives, we're trying to figure out faith, because sometimes we can be really good in this area and then let an attack come and it feels like your world crumbles. That's what it felt like for me. And I'm just being super transparent. Like, I felt like I was good. Like, I would get the jobs, I would go through school. Like, some things just came very easy, where it's like, God, this is what I want. And it was like, bam. And it's like, I want this house, bam. And then it was just like, oh, I want a baby. And it was just like, whoa.
That noise, do you have a noise for that?
And so it's like, and sometimes, and I will admit, in the beginning, my faith was shattered in that area. And it was almost to kind of like a rebuilding of a learning of God and what faith really meant. And then also not trying to self-wallow, and then also not being upset when other people had the promise. And
we can get into that as a whole.
And then you'll start to do the comparison thing, and then you'll start to see other people who aren't stewarding their promise well, and be like, okay, well, why did you? And it's just like, focus on me. And I think that's the biggest part of faith that I learned, that is the movement, is focusing on God, because that doesn't mean you're stagnant, because he's still beckoning you forward. And it's just like, I'm focusing on God, not focusing on my situation. And I'm focusing on God, what do you want me to learn out of this? And so I know for me, I've been able to have so many conversations with people who are going through similar struggles. And I often say, sometimes we go through things for other people, because we're living, breathing testimonies. And for me, I always want to be the best living, breathing testimony, and to make God proud, so that I can help lift someone else up. And I truly believe you are doing that with all the work that you're doing for Kendry. I know, and I see sometimes when it is hard and when it's challenging, physically being there, seeing it when you're just having a moment. And I'm just like, oh, snap, don't crash out, don't crash out. And you don't.
Yeah.
And you're able to gather yourself. And it's just like, nope, we're trusting and we're believing. Nope, this is how we do things. And it's just like, but you still do the discipline thing. I was like, oh, snaps, he still get, because there is also so many misnomers about autism and what people do. And so what I appreciate about, your journey, you haven't like stopped and you haven't stopped believing God through it and seeing and saying, this is what I want to see for my son. And this is what we are going to see for my son, and reinforcing those things to him, because it has made a huge difference into who he is and who he's growing up to be. So
Can I touch on something? So the one thing that you said, and we've talked about this, so we know there's a believer, Megan Ashley, who's she's walked through the same thing with her son. I think he also has Fragile X syndrome too, along with the autism diagnosis. But one of the things she said that really resonated with me was when she said that she had to, and I don't want to misquote her, but kind of like mourn the plans that she kind of had for her son.
The grieving.
Grieving, yeah. And so that like totally resonated with me, because one of the things you just said was you watch other families live out this, which you may have thought your relationship would look like with your kid. I was saying to someone the other day, like, Kendry, him and I don't have conversations. And there's like, he's 6, but there's a lot of kids at 6 who will tell their mom and dad about their day. They'll talk about how they feel. They'll say what they want to wear. We don't have those conversations, but I'm not going to stop believing that we will have those conversations.
Absolutely.
Right. And even with that, I feel like God is helping me to see that it may not look the way that you want it to look, Christian. Like, it may look a little different, and be open to that, right? And that's been also a big part of the faith journey, is like reimagining what Kendry's future is going to look like. It may not look like the typical, go to prom king, because I was like, I think the homecoming princess or something. I was really popular, but but it may not look like that.
Yeah.
It may look like him. He may choose not to go. He may want to do something else on prom night. And so, like, being okay with that, being open to that different future for him, and I think that as parents we should do that anyway.
Yeah.
But I think
that's all a trust in God.
That's all trust in God.
Because you say, I want it to look like this at the end of the day, and God's like, that's cool. But
that's your plan.
That's your plan, not mine.
Yeah.
And I want you to trust my plan is way better. And it's like, we may want to see a little girl swinging on the swing set in the picture, and he wants to see a whole amusement park. And it's just like
much bigger.
But
right?
because we don't have his vantage point, sometimes we're so quick to give in and to not trust that he's good in spite of not so good things. And so I love that about God, because even though we see his hand in everything, and I love how you are able to see, like, even you growing up and how you see those traits in Kendry, and how it's also helped you to understand him much better. I don't take it for granted that is ordained and that is by God.
Definitely not a coincidence.
Yeah. And so I appreciate all of that. I appreciate you for coming and sharing.
It's over already?
It's over already.
Jeez, I had more.
We can absolutely come back. Part two. Because this faith journey is ever evolving, and I'm continuing to learn each and every day. I hope you all are continuing to learn, and to learn what it looks like to walk faith out in your everyday life with everyday circumstances and situations. And so, not saying that it's going to be easy, but it will be worth it.
Amen.
So I'm so grateful you joined us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
This was a hug too.
Yes, this was such a God high five that, listen, all things will work together for those that believe and are called according to his purpose.
Come on, say it.
So walk in your purpose and know what God has called you to. Be committed to what he sees in his plan. Trust that, follow that, because that is the movement that you're looking for with faith. So listen, we're so excited that you joined us. We hope you gleaned and you learned from what we were sharing tonight. And we want you to take something away and to do something with it. What is that area in your life that you need to exhibit more faith in? And how can can you really show God, God, I trust you, I love you, and I know that your perfect will come throughout my life. So thank you for joining us. You can give. We have ways to give. You visit alcc1.org if you want to sow into this good ground. This is a great ministry. This is a teaching and a growing ministry. So thank you for tuning in. We will absolutely see you next time, and feel free to join us on Sundays or back here virtually via our podcast. But thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.